The wedding hall was filled with golden light, soft music, and the sound of laughter. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the guests, while servers moved quickly with trays of drinks and plates of appetizers. The smell of fresh roses filled the air, and a grand piano played quietly in the background. For many people, it was a night to remember, a celebration of love, family, and wealth. But for Lily, the daughter of Mr. Anderson, the powerful CEO who now sat in a wheelchair, it felt like a very lonely evening. Lily was a quiet girl, only 17, with long brown hair tied neatly behind her shoulders. She had been excited about the wedding when she first heard about it, but now she felt invisible in the grand hall. Her father, once strong and admired by everyone, had been paralyzed after a car accident. Although he still had authority and respect in the business world, in this family gathering, he was seen differently. Many guests looked at him with pity, while others ignored him completely, as though his wheelchair made him less important. Mr. Anderson sat proudly near the front, wearing a sharp suit, his posture straight despite his condition. He was proud to see his niece getting married. His daughter Lily sat beside him at the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She glanced at the crowd, hoping someone would come and talk to her, but everyone seemed too busy laughing, dancing, or making connections with other wealthy guests. The bride's family moved around the hall, shaking hands and greeting important visitors. They were focused on politicians, business partners, and wealthy friends who had come to honor the occasion. Lily's presence didn't seem important to them. She was family, yes, but she was also the daughter of a man many whispered about. He used to be so powerful, but look at him now, one guest said softly to another. The company is not the same without him walking into meetings with his strong voice. Lily's heart sank as she overheard such words. She wanted to stand up and shout that her father was still strong, still a leader, still respected. But her voice felt locked inside her chest. She was too young, too shy, and too afraid of embarrassing him in front of so many eyes. So instead, she lowered her gaze, staring at the untouched plate of food in front of her. Around her, the party grew louder. The bride and groom danced in the center of the hall while everyone clapped. Glasses of champagne were raised, and photographers flashed their cameras. But at Lily's table, it was quiet. Nobody stopped to greet her. Nobody asked her to join the dance floor. She felt like a shadow in her own family's celebration. She thought about her father, the man who had built a business empire from nothing. He had worked day and night for years, traveling, attending meetings, and making bold decisions that made his company one of the strongest in the country. People once admired his confidence and power. Now, many avoided him, as if his wheelchair made them uncomfortable. Lily hated that. She loved her father deeply and knew the strength he carried inside, even if others chose not to see it. As she sat there, her thoughts became heavier. She wondered if this was how her life would always be, quietly standing in the background, ignored because of her father's condition. The music grew louder, laughter echoed, but none of it touched her. She wished someone, anyone, would notice her. One server passed by carrying glasses filled with sparkling wine. He glanced at her briefly but kept moving, too busy with his duties. Lily sighed and turned her eyes to the floor. The lights above seemed brighter now, almost too bright, making her feel exposed even though nobody was looking at her. She wanted to escape, but she knew she couldn't leave her father's side. He needed her, and she would never abandon him. She watched him for a moment. Though he sat in silence, his eyes were filled with pride as he looked at the bride and groom. Lily admired how calm he appeared, how he didn't let the whispers or stares disturb him. He had always taught her that strength wasn't just about standing tall, it was about holding your head high even when the world tried to push you down. Yet even with his lesson, Lily's heart still ached from the loneliness pressing in around her. A few children from the bride's side ran past her table, laughing and chasing one another. They nearly bumped into her chair but didn't bother to say sorry. She pulled her chair closer to her father, hiding even more. She wished she could join them, but she felt too out of place. The announcer's voice echoed through the microphone, calling everyone to prepare for the first toast. Glasses clinked as guests raised their drinks high. Lily lifted hers too, a simple glass of water, but nobody noticed. The room cheered loudly as the groom thanked his parents and the bride's family for their love and support. Everyone clapped, but Lily's hands stayed still. She thought again of her mother, who had passed away years ago. Her mother would have never allowed her to sit alone like this. She would have pulled her onto the dance floor, smiled at her, reminded her that she was beautiful and important. Without her mother, Lily often felt lost in moments like this. The minutes passed slowly. Servers moved gracefully between the tables, balancing trays and collecting empty plates. Guests laughed louder, their voices blending into one endless hum. But to Lily, the noise only deepened her silence. Her fingers twisted nervously around her napkin, and she wondered how much longer she had to stay. Her father turned his head slightly toward her, his voice gentle. "Are you all right, Lily?" he asked. She forced a small smile and nodded. She didn't want to worry him, not tonight. He deserved to enjoy the wedding, even if she couldn't. Inside, though, she was breaking. It wasn't the grand hall or the music that hurt her. It was the feeling of being invisible in a room full of people. She thought about how unfair it was, how quickly people forgot kindness and loyalty when life changed. Her father's accident had made people see him differently, and because of that, they saw her differently too. The night carried on with more music, more speeches, and more dancing. But for Lily, the celebration felt like a test of patience. She sat silently, waiting, hoping, wishing that someone would reach out and remind her she mattered too. She didn't know that soon, a simple voice from someone unexpected would change everything for her and her father. The music in the hall became livelier as the band shifted to faster tunes. Guests clapped and laughed, raising their glasses high as the bride and groom made another round on the dance floor. The air was filled with joy, but Lily felt as if she were sitting behind a glass wall, watching a world she could not enter. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her fingers playing with the edge of the napkin, when she heard whispers from the table behind her. "They say the company hasn't been the same since the accident," a man murmured, not realizing Lily could hear him. "True," another replied quickly. "He was once unstoppable, but look at him now. The man can't even stand. How much longer can he lead?" Lily's throat tightened. Every word stabbed at her heart. She wanted to whirl around and defend her father, to tell them he still signed deals, still gave advice, still carried wisdom that most men in the room could never dream of. But her voice refused to rise. Her eyes watered, and she pressed her lips together. Her father, Mr. Anderson, sat calmly beside her, his face unreadable. It seemed he hadn't heard them, or perhaps he had simply grown used to such remarks. Lily, however, felt her chest ache. She lowered her eyes to the table again, praying for the evening to pass quickly. Then, as if out of nowhere, a warm voice broke through her thoughts. "Would you like some juice, miss?" Lily lifted her head. A young server stood before her, holding a silver tray. He was tall, with kind eyes and a calm smile. His dark skin glowed under the golden lights, and his posture carried quiet confidence. She looked around, surprised. No one else had spoken to her all evening. I don't drink juice during dinners," Lily said softly, almost shyly. "That's all right," the server replied, his tone gentle but firm. "But it's not good to sit here without anything in your hand when everyone else is raising glasses. Here, this is fresh orange juice. It might make the night feel a little less heavy." For a moment, Lily didn't move. Then she slowly reached out and took the glass. "Thank you," she whispered. The server gave her a nod and placed the tray back against his hip. "You shouldn't sit here alone," he said simply. "This is your family's celebration too." Lily blinked. She hadn't expected such words, especially not from someone who was supposed to move quietly and remain unnoticed during the event. Something about the way he said it, not as pity but as encouragement, touched her heart. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, though her voice lacked conviction. The server tilted his head slightly. "Are you? Because I've worked enough weddings to know when someone is being ignored. And right now, I see you sitting here, and I know you don't deserve that." Lily's cheeks grew warm. She didn't know how to respond. Nobody had ever noticed her loneliness like this, let alone said it out loud. She looked down at the glass in her hand and realized her fingers were trembling. The server smiled again, softer this time. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly, introducing himself, though servers usually never did. "If you need anything tonight, just call me. Don't let yourself feel invisible." Lily hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'm Lily." "Nice to meet you, Lily," Marcus replied, his voice steady. Then he straightened, excused himself politely, and returned to serving other tables. Lily watched him move across the hall. His steps were careful but strong, his tray balanced with ease as he weaved between guests. She had never seen a server carry himself with such quiet dignity. Something about him felt different, genuine, as if he saw people not for their status or wealth but for who they truly were. As Marcus disappeared into the crowd, Lily felt a small spark of warmth in her chest. For the first time that night, she didn't feel entirely forgotten. Someone had spoken to her not out of obligation, but because he truly cared. Still, the evening continued with the same coldness from the other guests. As speeches began, Lily clapped politely, though nobody noticed. Her father nodded with respect at each toast, his calm face hiding any trace of discomfort. Later, when the dance floor filled again, Lily remained seated. Couples swayed to the music, children twirled with laughter, and the bride's parents moved proudly among the guests. Nobody extended a hand toward Lily. She felt the ache return. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Marcus again. He was setting down a tray at a nearby table. When he glanced toward her, their eyes met. He didn't smile this time, but there was a look in his eyes that seemed to say, "You're not alone. I see you." That small, unspoken message filled her with a strange courage. She sat a little straighter, sipped her juice, and dared to lift her chin higher. Minutes passed. Finally, Marcus returned to her table, this time with an empty tray. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low so only she could hear. "You know," he said, "I once worked at a wedding where the bride's younger brother sat just like you are now. Alone, quiet, forgotten. But in the end, he was the one who gave the most heartfelt speech, and everyone remembered it for years. Sometimes the ones people overlook have the strongest voices." Lily looked at him in surprise. His words carried weight, as though he spoke from truth, not from habit. "Do you really think so?" she asked softly. Marcus nodded. "I do. Because I believe everyone has a voice worth hearing. Even when others are too blind to see it." Lily felt her throat tighten again, but this time, not from pain. It was from gratitude. For the first time that evening, she allowed a small smile to appear. She wanted to ask Marcus more, but he was called away by another guest. As he left, Lily sat back, holding his words close. His kindness had planted a seed in her heart, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as powerless as she felt. The hall roared again with laughter and chatter, but now it sounded different to Lily. She wasn't entirely invisible anymore. Someone had seen her, someone had spoken up. And even though Marcus was just a server in the eyes of others, to her, he had already done something extraordinary, he had given her back a piece of herself that the evening had stolen. She glanced at her father. He still looked calm, proud, and unshaken. But she knew he must have felt the coldness of the guests too. She squeezed his hand gently, promising herself she wouldn't let him feel alone either. As the music played on and the party reached its peak, Lily's heart carried a quiet strength. She didn't know what would happen next, but she sensed that Marcus's presence was only the beginning of something important. The night was not over, and perhaps the story of the wedding had only just begun. The evening grew deeper, and the wedding hall continued to sparkle with laughter, music, and dancing. The bride and groom were surrounded by their friends, family, and business associates, all eager to be part of the glamorous celebration. Yet at one corner of the grand ballroom, Lily still sat beside her father, her glass of juice half empty, her thoughts wandering. But this time, her loneliness was softened by the memory of Marcus, the young server who had spoken to her with such sincerity. His words echoed in her mind, "You shouldn't sit here alone. This is your family's celebration too." Lily kept watching the crowd, still unsure how to move among them. She was grateful for Marcus's kindness, but she didn't expect to see him again. After all, he was just a server, busy running around with trays and taking care of the guests. She thought he had probably forgotten about her. But a few minutes later, when she least expected it, Marcus returned. This time, he carried only a small jug of water, moving gracefully between tables. He stopped near her again and leaned slightly, speaking softly so only she could hear. "You haven't smiled tonight," he said. "Not even once. That doesn't seem right for someone as young as you." Lily blinked in surprise. Nobody had noticed her feelings all evening, not even her relatives. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. She lowered her eyes shyly and whispered, "There wasn't much to smile about." Marcus tilted his head, studying her face. "Maybe. Or maybe you've been looking at the wrong things." For a moment, Lily stayed quiet. Then, almost without realizing it, she found herself talking. Words spilled out of her as though a door had been unlocked. She told Marcus how people avoided her because of her father's condition, how the whispers about him broke her heart, and how she felt like a shadow in her own family. She admitted that she sometimes wished she could disappear rather than sit quietly through nights like these. Marcus listened carefully, his eyes steady and calm. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her, didn't look around as if distracted. He gave her something rare, his full attention. When she finally stopped speaking, a little embarrassed by how much she had shared, he nodded slowly. "You know," Marcus said, his voice low and thoughtful, "strength isn't always about standing tall in front of others. Sometimes it's about sitting quietly and still carrying dignity, just like your father is doing tonight. People may not see it, but I do. And I think you carry that same strength inside you." Lily felt her cheeks warm again. Nobody had ever told her that before. She had always thought of herself as shy, weak, and invisible. But hearing those words from Marcus made her see herself differently, even if just a little. Marcus paused before continuing. "When I was younger, I thought nobody saw me either. I used to believe I was invisible in this world. But I realized something sometimes, it's not that people don't see you. It's that they're too busy looking at the wrong things. And when they finally look in the right place, they'll find out how much you matter." Lily raised her eyes, curious. "What do you mean? Did something happen to you?" Marcus gave a small smile, though there was a touch of sadness in it. "I grew up in a family where money was always short. My mother works long hours as a nurse, and I take care of my two younger brothers. I started working jobs like this one to help pay for their school books and food. Some people look at me and only see a server. But that's not who I am. I have dreams too. I want to finish my studies, maybe become a teacher one day. But until then, I do what I have to do for my family." Lily's eyes widened. She had never imagined that behind the calm smile of a server there could be such a story. She admired the way he spoke, not with bitterness, but with quiet strength. She thought about how different his life was from hers, yet how much courage he carried. "You work so hard," Lily said softly. "And you still have hope." Marcus chuckled gently. "Hope is free. And sometimes, it's the only thing that keeps you moving." His words struck her deeply. She thought about her father, about how he had built a whole empire from nothing, how he had faced challenges that would have broken other men. And now, even in his wheelchair, he still held his head high. She realized Marcus was right, her father's strength hadn't vanished. It had only changed shape. As they spoke, a few guests glanced at their table, whispering to one another. It was unusual to see a young guest talking with a server as if they were equals. Some frowned, others shook their heads slightly, but Marcus didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he chose not to care. He kept his attention on Lily, as though she were the only one in the hall. Lily, for the first time that night, smiled. It was small and shy, but it was real. "Thank you," she whispered. "For talking to me. For listening." Marcus's eyes softened. "Sometimes all people need is someone to hear them. And Lily, you're worth hearing." Those words lit something inside her. She felt lighter, stronger, as if the shadows around her had begun to fade. She looked at her father again, who was still watching the celebration with calm dignity, and she silently promised herself she would never let people's whispers define how she saw him or herself. The conversation carried on for a few minutes more. Marcus told her about how he juggled late-night shifts, early mornings, and studying whenever he had time. He spoke about his younger brothers, one who loved football and the other who loved books, and how he wanted to make sure they had more opportunities than he did. His honesty touched Lily deeply. She realized he wasn't just a server, he was a brother, a dreamer, a fighter. When Marcus was finally called away again, Lily sat back with a changed heart. The hall still buzzed with laughter, but the noise didn't sting as much anymore. She didn't feel as invisible as before. She felt seen, valued, and maybe even brave enough to face the rest of the evening with her head held higher. She sipped the last of her juice slowly, replaying Marcus's words in her mind. For the first time that night, she wasn't only the paralyzed CEO's daughter sitting in the corner. She was Lily, someone who mattered, someone who could be strong in her own way. What she didn't know was that the night would soon test that strength. For in just a little while, careless words spoken by someone in the crowd would cut deeper than anything she had heard before. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be her voice that broke the silence, it would be Marcus's, carrying the truth with courage no one expected. The night was growing warmer inside the grand wedding hall. Guests were flushed from dancing and laughter, their voices echoing across the chandeliers and polished marble floor. The bride's parents beamed with pride, and the groom's family looked delighted. It seemed as though everything was perfect, but for Lily, the atmosphere still felt heavy. Even though Marcus had spoken to her and given her hope, she knew the whispers and quiet judgments in the room had not disappeared. They floated around her like invisible threads, cutting deeper every time she caught one. When the music softened, the announcer stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a cheerful tone, "may we have your attention? We invite the family members and closest friends to raise their glasses for a special toast." Everyone turned their eyes to the front. Glasses were filled again with champagne. The bride's uncle, a man with a booming voice and a reputation for speaking his mind, walked to the stage. He was known for his sense of humor, though sometimes his words were sharper than he realized. "Tonight," he began, smiling, "we celebrate love, unity, and the bright future of our dear couple. But let us also be thankful for the families who raised them, who shaped them, and who taught them strength." The guests nodded and murmured in agreement, lifting their glasses in unison. But then, his eyes flickered toward Mr. Anderson, sitting in his wheelchair, and without warning, his tone shifted slightly. Of course, he added with a chuckle, life is unpredictable. One day you are on top of the world, the next day, he gestured vaguely toward the wheelchair. Well, let's just say, it reminds us how fragile power can be. The room filled with a mixture of nervous laughter and awkward silence. Some guests chuckled softly, others exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Lily froze. Her stomach dropped, and her hands clenched tightly around the edge of her chair. The words felt like a slap, not only at her father but at her too. She glanced at him, but Mr. Anderson's face remained calm, his eyes steady. He didn't flinch, didn't frown, didn't give the uncle the satisfaction of a reaction. Still, Lily's heart was pounding. She wanted to scream, to shout at the man for his cruelty. Didn't he know how hard her father had fought to still be here? Didn't he know how much dignity he carried even in his wheelchair? But her voice refused to come out. Her throat tightened, her eyes blurred, and she lowered her head in shame, unable to face the crowd. At that very moment, a voice rose from the side of the room. It was not loud, but it carried a strength that made everyone pause. "Excuse me, sir." The words came from Marcus. He stood a few steps away, still holding a tray at his side. His posture was straight, his eyes steady, and his tone respectful but firm. All eyes turned toward him in shock. A server had spoken during a toast, something no one expected, something no one thought was even allowed. The uncle frowned, clearly offended. "What is it, young man?" he asked sharply, as if ready to dismiss him. Marcus took a deep breath. His voice did not waver. "With respect, Mr. Anderson deserves better than to be spoken of like that. He is not just a man in a chair. He is someone who built an empire with his own hands, someone who gave opportunities to thousands of people, and someone who never gave up even when life tested him in ways most of us can't imagine." The room went silent. Guests froze with their glasses half raised, stunned by the courage of the server. The uncle shifted uncomfortably, his smirk fading. Marcus continued, his voice steady, carrying across the hall. "It is easy to laugh when you stand, when you walk, when you dance. But true strength is shown when you can no longer do those things and still hold your head high. Mr. Anderson does that every single day. And for that, he deserves our respect, not our jokes." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She stared at Marcus, unable to believe what she was hearing. This young man, who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, had spoken out for her father when nobody else dared. Guests looked at one another, some embarrassed, some ashamed. A few nodded slowly, realizing the truth in Marcus's words. The laughter that had followed the uncle's remark now seemed cruel and shallow. The uncle cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Well," he muttered, "I didn't mean it that way. It was only a light joke." But his voice lacked the confidence it had moments earlier. The hall had shifted. The energy had changed. Lily turned to her father. For the first time that evening, she saw his calm face soften. There was a quiet pride in his eyes, and a faint smile touched his lips. He looked at Marcus as though he recognized the young man's courage, as though he had been waiting for someone to speak the words he himself chose not to say. The announcer tried to bring the mood back, quickly thanking the uncle for his toast and inviting everyone to drink. Glasses were raised again, but the clinking sounded different now, muted, thoughtful, almost guilty. Marcus stepped back, returning to his role as a server, but the room no longer saw him the same way. They saw him as someone brave, someone willing to risk his place to defend what was right. Lily could hardly contain her emotions. She wanted to stand and clap for him, but instead, she stayed seated, her heart swelling with gratitude. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her chair, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. For the first time all evening, she felt like she wasn't alone. Someone had finally spoken up, and it had changed everything. Her father leaned slightly toward her, his voice low but steady. "Did you hear him, Lily?" She nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "Yes, father." "That young man has courage," Mr. Anderson said softly. "More than most of the people in this room." Lily looked at Marcus again, moving back to his duties with quiet dignity. Her heart whispered the same truth her father had just spoken. He wasn't just a server anymore. He was a voice of justice, a reminder that respect should never be measured by wealth or power but by character. The evening continued, but nothing felt the same. The uncle kept quiet for the rest of the night. The whispers that had once mocked now turned into murmurs of admiration for Marcus's boldness. And Lily, who had spent most of the evening feeling invisible, felt a new sense of pride not just in Marcus, but in herself and in her father. For the first time that night, she lifted her chin, no longer ashamed, no longer hiding. Because she knew that even in the grandest hall, even in the middle of the wealthiest crowd, one honest voice could silence 1,000 whispers. And that voice had come from the most unexpected place. The music played again after the toast, but the mood inside the wedding hall was not the same as before. Guests were still smiling, still clinking their glasses, but there was a quiet shift in the air. The words of Marcus, the young server, had settled in everyone's minds. People who had once whispered about Mr. Anderson's weakness now avoided each other's eyes, as if embarrassed. They had laughed at a cruel remark, but Marcus's courage had exposed the truth. Lily sat taller beside her father. Her eyes were still wet, but her heart felt lighter than it had all evening. For so long she had wished for someone to defend her father, to remind the world of the man he truly was. And tonight, when she thought no one would care, a server, a stranger, had done exactly that. She could hardly believe it. Her father placed his hand gently over hers. His touch was steady, his face calm, but in his eyes there was a warmth she hadn't seen in a long time. "You see, Lily," he said softly, "there are still people in this world who remember what respect means." Lily nodded, squeezing his hand. She didn't trust her voice not to tremble, so she stayed silent, but inside her heart was full. After a few minutes, Mr. Anderson raised his hand slightly, signaling for the microphone. The announcer, surprised but respectful, quickly carried it over to him. The music softened as the guests turned toward the man in the wheelchair. They had seen him sitting quietly all evening, but now he was about to speak. Mr. Anderson's voice, though slower than it once had been, carried a power that filled the hall. "I was not planning to speak tonight," he began, "because this evening is about my niece and her husband. But I cannot ignore the moment that just passed. You all heard the words of that young man." He gestured toward Marcus, who stood humbly at the edge of the hall, still holding his tray. "He reminded us of something important, that respect is not measured by how much we can do, but by how much we continue to stand for, even when life changes everything." The hall was silent. No glasses clinked, no whispers filled the air. Every eye was fixed on the CEO. "I know many of you have looked at me differently since my accident," he continued, his voice steady. "Some with pity, some with doubt, some even with disappointment. But tonight, I want to say this: I am still the man I always was. I still love my family, I still guide my company, and I still believe in building a world where dignity matters more than power. And if you ever forget that, then look not at me, but at this young man, Marcus, who spoke when no one else dared." The applause began slowly at first, just a few claps here and there. Then it spread, louder and louder, until the entire hall erupted with sound. People stood, clapping and nodding, some even cheering. For the first time all evening, the applause was not for the bride or groom, but for the paralyzed CEO and the young server who had defended him. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, not used to so many eyes on him. He gave a small bow and tried to step back into the shadows, but the moment had already lifted him forward. He was no longer invisible. Lily clapped with the others, her chest swelling with pride. She looked at Marcus through her tears, her smile brighter than he had ever seen. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud not just of her father, but of herself for enduring the silence of the evening until this moment of truth arrived. The bride's family approached Mr. Anderson afterward, their faces flushed with embarrassment. "We are truly sorry," the bride's mother said softly. The remark was careless. "Please forgive us." Mr. Anderson nodded politely. "Tonight is about love," he replied calmly. "Let us remember that." But everyone knew the lesson of the evening would not be forgotten. As the music picked up again and the guests returned to the dance floor, Mr. Anderson asked for Marcus to be brought over. The young man walked carefully across the hall, unsure of what to expect. When he reached the table, he bowed his head respectfully. "Sir," he said softly. Mr. Anderson studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Marcus," he said warmly, "you showed more courage tonight than many men twice your age. Tell me, what is it that you dream of?" Marcus hesitated, glancing quickly at Lily before answering. "I dream of finishing my studies, sir. Of becoming a teacher. But right now, I have responsibilities. My family needs me." The CEO nodded thoughtfully. "Family always comes first. I respect that. But no dream should be buried forever. I want you to know that I will help you. My foundation has scholarships for young men like you. If you are willing to continue your studies, the door is open." Marcus's eyes widened. For a moment, he was speechless. He had never expected anything like this. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "Thank you, sir. I I don't know what to say." "Say nothing now," Mr. Anderson replied gently. "Just promise me you will not give up on yourself. Because you proved tonight that you are already a teacher teaching this entire hall what respect looks like." Lily's heart swelled with admiration. She looked at Marcus, her eyes shining. He glanced back at her, and though neither spoke, the understanding between them was clear. This night had changed them both. The rest of the evening unfolded with a softer tone. Guests greeted Mr. Anderson with more warmth, shaking his hand, bowing respectfully, speaking to him with the kindness they should have shown all along. Lily was no longer ignored. Several people came to her table, smiling at her, asking her to dance, offering small words of comfort. She declined politely, choosing instead to stay close to her father, but inside she felt different. She no longer felt invisible. As the wedding drew to a close, the bride and groom departed with cheers and applause. Guests began to leave, still whispering about the unusual but unforgettable moment of the night. The grand chandeliers dimmed slowly, the music softened, and the servers began to clear the tables. Marcus passed by one last time, offering a quiet smile to Lily. She whispered, "Thank you," and though her voice was soft, he heard it. He gave a small nod before continuing his work. Outside, the cool night air greeted the guests as they left the hall. Mr. Anderson's car was brought forward, and Lily helped guide his wheelchair toward it. Before stepping inside, her father looked once more at the grand building behind them. "Tonight was not about me," he said softly to Lily. "It was about a young man's courage. Remember this, my dear, sometimes the greatest voices come from the most unexpected places. And they remind us of who we truly are." Lily held his hand tightly, her heart glowing with pride. She would remember this night forever, not for the flowers, not for the music, not even for the bride and groom, but for the moment when truth and respect rose above wealth and power. As their car drove away, the city lights twinkled outside the window. Lily leaned against her father's shoulder, whispering to herself the lesson she would never forget, that dignity cannot be taken by whispers, and that even the quietest voice can change a room full of people. And somewhere inside that hall, as the last lights were turned off, Marcus walked home with tired feet but a strong heart, knowing that his life, too, had changed in ways he had never imagined.